Hey everybody, welcome to our very last module, Librarian Competencies. This is another program that has been given by Mary Kelly and I. We wrote a book, 5 years ago, something like that, about taking your library career to the next level. And one of the ideas in the book is about how to stay relevant. Taking your career to the next level means just going beyond your day job, being on committees and contributing to the profession at a higher level. And so some of the competencies that are required to do those kinds of things. So this is a presentation that we have given over the years based on those concepts. About is this word bunheads, and I can't take credit for it. Kevin King at the Kalamazoo Library is the one who coined this term. I heard him say it, and it is derogatory for a reason. Bunheads are old school librarians that are what I like to call RIP, retired in place. They don't bother trying to keep up. They only see value in traditional library services. They are the stereotype. When I was a fairly new librarian, I used to attend a monthly meeting. It was like a committee, the Adult Services Committee of the Library Network. And I loved that committee as a new librarian because I learned so much from other practicing librarians. Way back in the day, there was a librarian who has long since retired, but she told me that I was still new and sparkly and that when the shine wore off, I would understand that people are basically stupid and that libraries are lost forever. And I thought, that is so sad. Why would I start a career if I really believed that? And I don't believe that. It was time for her to retire. She was a bunhead. She wasn't bothering to keep up or learn new things. She didn't see any value in the new types of services that libraries were offering. So look, we are a profession that is desperate for status and recognition. So if we act like the old school shushing librarians, we will continue to be seen that way. We have to push the envelope of what's possible in libraries. We have to be one step better than what our users can get at home, on their own, or with Google. We have to help them learn to use what they have at home and search Google better. We have to give them access to information that's not found through Google, the deep web, the library databases, government databases, things like that. We have to give them faster internet and sparklier computer terminals. We have to give them comfortable chairs. We have to give them spaces to meet and to collaborate. Otherwise, they have no reason to come to us. We have to be the reason that they choose the library. So what does the future hold for libraries? I believe it's going to be more about teaching and directing patrons' learning and less about fact-finding, more about collaborative spaces and less about physical materials, more about access to information, like I said, the deep web, providing those deep web sources that Google doesn't link to, library databases, online classes, subscription services. There will be more blended librarian positions. So, for example, social services in libraries. In the U.S., funding for social service agencies like Meals on Wheels, Planned Parenthood, public broadcasting are threatened. Libraries pick up the slack through some of our subscription services that we're offering. We have databases and streaming services like Hoopla and Canopy, Overdrive that in some ways can pick up the slack on that. There are a lot of libraries that are offering free lunches in the summer when kids are out of school, when kids don't have a free lunch option like the schools sometimes provide. So libraries can sometimes pick up the slack in social services. There are also going to be more embedded librarian positions. So embedding librarians in places other than traditional libraries to provide library services like research help, information access, technology training in areas like business and law and education and art. We will spend more time working with outside partners. We will also spend more time on creating content for mobile and online services and less on selecting physical materials. We will spend more time event planning and creating information exchange programs and workshops, seminars, events. We will also have, more stressed out patrons, more complicated copy machines, more difficult situations that we need to learn how to navigate. I love this quote from Norway. It is not until our knowledge is tested in an encounter with reality that we become real librarians. So the competencies that are necessary to get a library degree are not always or completely the same as the competencies required to work as a librarian. Library schools are doing a good job preparing library students for the job, the competencies that are required to get the job and to do the job, but not always for preparing students for the reality part of the library job, especially in public libraries. All those difficult situations that I was just talking about. Librarians are now being trained to provide Narcan, in overdose situations. That's reality. Providing patron service in a library is that encounter with reality that helps you become a real librarian. You have the MLIS degree. That's just the first step. But our knowledge is tested when people in real libraries who are homeless and who are hungry and who are substance abusers, they need our help as much as anyone. They need access to resources. So we are providing services that library school does not always prepare us for. And I just want to mention that. I know there's not a class in any library school that I'm aware of providing information to homeless people or whatever the situation may be. We are starting to do a better job of talking about how social services interact with libraries. That is a competency for the future. So in addition to plumbing and heating and cooling and breaking up fights and what is pornography and what I like to call wildlife management, Mary Kelly actually once had to help move a dead deer out of the library parking lot because story time was about to happen and we couldn't have Bambi's mom dead in the library parking lot. So that's wildlife management. There have been chipmunks in the book drop and birds flying around in the library. It happens. So all of the characteristics of today's professionals that were on the previous slide there are important for librarians, but they're also very generic. So let's talk about competencies that are specific to our profession. I really have broken up a fight between two people, two not older men. One was maybe 50 and one was maybe a little older, 60-ish. One of them was making noise and it was bothering the other one. They started sort of yelling at each other and shoving each other around. Adrenaline kicks in sometimes, and I literally stood between them, shoved them apart, looked at the one guy who was a regular and said, "You go over there to this other computer and you just shut up," basically. So sometimes the professional side of you has to take a back seat to the practicality. I can't have a fight in the library. So I really have broken up a fight between two men. Not advocating that that's the best way to do it. Like I said, for me, adrenaline just kicks in and I'm a person who takes action. I could have called 911. That would have been probably a better option, but that's how it worked out for me. Another example is a job posting I once saw in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The job posting for the library director literally included shoveling snow. So you can sort of assume that someone somewhere said, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so they decided, well, it has to be done. And sometimes you're going to be the person who does it, whether you're the director or the volunteer or whoever. So put it in the job description, and now, you know what? No surprises. You're in the UP. You're going to have to shovel some snow. So I'm sharing these stories because an important part of librarian job description is often other duties as assigned. You can't avoid these things in any job. So you know what? Just expect them. You won't always like all the work that has to be done. That's why it's spelled work, W-O-R-K, and not F-U-N, fun. It's work. We get paid to be there. It's our job. Sometimes we have to do dirty jobs. We have to plunge toilets. We have to fix the heating and cooling system. We have to break up fights. We have to tell porn guy to go away, and we have to get the chipmunk out of the book drop. It has to be done. No matter who you are and what position you're in, just expect to have to do some of these things sometimes. So the competency here is sort of not being a snowflake. Snowflakes are individual and everyone is unique and precious and delicate. You don't get to be a snowflake. When the work has to be done, no matter who you are, you just have to do it. I believe as a manager even that you have to take a few of the dirty jobs. You have to take a lot of the dirty jobs because then the staff will trust you. You're not always asking someone else to do the dirty work. You're willing to do your part. So, in addition to all of these lovely competencies, I do want to go through some more traditional librarian competencies for the future. The first one being technology. Technology used to mean computers. Now it includes any information delivery platform. So we're talking about chat, text, email, phone, fax, mobile devices, social media. We have content management systems and web design. We have Alexa and Siri and smart refrigerators and Fitbits. We have video, audio, gaming. Technology includes all of these things, even connection types. We have to be aware of what Wi-Fi is and Bluetooth, what HDMI is and Ethernet, different adapters. We have to be aware of augmented and virtual reality. So technology, competency in library, it means supporting anything offered by your library, both hardware and software. If you put it out there for the public to use, your staff have to be able to support it. And if you're the librarian at the reference desk, this probably includes print management systems, scanners, copy machines, databases, streaming services, ebook platforms. We have to be able to support all of these things. I want to also point out that I'm talking about having an awareness of these things. The level of proficiency depends on your organization's mission, its goals, its customers, the way its staff is organized. My library has tech assistants that sit at the reference desk with us. We're so fortunate to have them, and they're wonderful. They're not always available, so the librarians still need to have an awareness of everything that I already listed. But we do have help available to us in our library, and for that I'm very grateful. Not every library where you work has that luxury. So the level of proficiency on anything that the library offers depends on the makeup of your library. So in addition to technology, the ability to easily learn new technologies is also a good competency. An important competency. So we build a foundation of general understanding, and then new technology is not like starting over every time. So for example, you learned about Wi-Fi and then we understood Bluetooth. You learned about VHS and then you understood DVD and then you experienced YouTube. Streaming came next, which combined the understanding of internet and video concepts. So these things build on each other. It's not like starting over every time. There are so many resources online that can help us keep up with technology. I want to shout out to techboomers.com. If you've not heard of techboomers.com, take a look at it. It's so amazing. They do a lot of instruction on social media and eBay and how to buy airfare online and just anything on the internet. It's called Tech Boomers, BOOMERS.com. My library offers a subscription to lynda.com. That's LYNDA if you've not heard of it. Lynda.com has all kinds of video tutorials on business topics and technology topics. Really, really fantastic. It's a little bit expensive in our library, totally worth it. We push it a lot. If you work in a library that doesn't have funding for that kind of thing, you know what? YouTube has all kinds of free tutorials that are really good. If your library creates a YouTube channel, you can link to all kinds of great tutorials that are made by other people, professional level in some cases. Or you can make your own tutorials for a YouTube channel on the different technologies that your library offers. So not just the ability to learn new technologies, but also an enthusiasm for learning new technologies is important. We need to keep up with new tech and what libraries are or could be doing with it. There are all kinds of technologies out there that are not marketed to libraries, but if we think outside the box a little bit, we can make them work for us. I'm thinking of things like Alexa and Siri. Has anyone used them at a reference desk? I haven't thought this through. This sort of just came to the top of my head, but there very well could be all kinds of ways libraries could use that kind of technology. Here's another example. Way back in the early 2000s, maybe 2003, 2004, the library where I was working had this head of IT. And by head of IT, I mean he was our tech guy. He didn't have a department. It was just him. He was awesome. He was not a librarian. He didn't have a library degree. He had a bachelor's degree in computer science, but he just loved libraries and he just got it. And so he attended the consumer technology conference that they have in Las Vegas every year. I don't think that's exactly what it's called. But he attended it because he just likes that kind of thing. And they were talking about tablet PCs. This is way before, today's iPads and tablets were a thing. This is the early 2000s. They had tablet PCs that you would write on with a stylus. They had handwriting recognition. It was like the wave of the future. And they were marketing them to doctors. And the idea was that when a doctor visits a patient, in an exam room, they would have the patient's file there with them. They could, put a prescription through right to the pharmacy. They could look things up in their medical databases, that they had information at their fingertips that would speed things along and give better service to the patient than they could give without these tablet PCs. And Derek said, forget about doctors. Sure, that's cool, but librarians. Think about what librarians could do with these tablet PCs. And so the library where I worked was very forward thinking, and we bought 2 of these tablet PCs. There was actually an article about us in the Wall Street Journal way back, it might have been 2005 at the very latest, about how our library was using these tablet PCs so that we could help people find things. When you're doing a reference interview with a patron and you start walking toward the stacks, thinking, I know just what you want, I know just where it is, inevitably they have a follow-up question, or you think of another source through a database that you want to show them, but you have to either disconnect with them, leave them in the stacks and go back to your librarian computer to look things up, or it's just too much all at once. And so with these tablet PCs, we could go into the stacks with the patrons, we could look things up in the catalog and the databases and even print articles from them right there in the stacks, while we were in the space with the books on the topic as well. We loved it. It was sort of the precursor to roaming reference, or roving reference, some libraries call it. That library, Salem South Lyon District Library, was one of the first libraries, at least in Michigan and at least among public libraries, that was doing this roaming reference. I published an article about it. I believe it was in 2005. It was a journal called Library High Tech News, about wireless reference or something like that. It was a long time ago. I've already forgotten. But there was an article in there about what we were doing with these tablet PCs. Now with Wi-Fi and an iPad, roaming reference is much more standard an idea. We even did it with iPod touches at one point. It was kind of a cool idea. So the point here is that the competency for librarians is the ability to easily learn new technologies with the foundation of a technology you can build upon, and also an enthusiasm for learning new technologies so that we can keep up. research seems like a pretty standard competency a librarian needs to have. I'm going to take it a step further and say that this includes, the ability to choose the best delivery method for the information sought. So for example, when someone comes to the reference desk and says, I need to learn to dance, I'm getting married and I can't afford dance lessons, but I have to do this, dance in front of everyone at my wedding. I don't want to make a jerk out of myself. How can I learn this? Well, back in the day, a book with black and white pictures was a way to learn how to dance. That's not the best delivery method anymore. A video, a DVD, a YouTube video on dancing is a much better choice. So not only do we need to choose the best delivery method for the information sought, we also need to be able to curate collections in multiple formats. So we need to be able to curate collections in Pinterest, YouTube, streaming services, e-collections. Information literacy and transliteracy. Transliteracy is the ability to use information across platforms or across formats. Fake news is more important than ever. It's a hot topic, right? So librarians need to evaluate information sources carefully and teach patrons to do the same. So we previously mentioned social media, for example, as an information delivery platform. I've talked to patrons who want information sent to them via text or via Facebook Messenger. Just the other day, a college student asked me, can you send me this link via Facebook Messenger? And I thought, email would be easier for me, but if that's the way you want it, no skin off my back, I will send it to you through Facebook Messenger. So we have to be able to use these information delivery systems in whatever way the patron wants to receive their information. Marketing is a competency. It needs to be cross-departmental. We need to market services and programs and collections for children to their parents and to their teachers. We need to cross-promote services for seniors to their adult children. Circulation should know what's happening in adult services. Teen services should know what's happening in cataloging. Everybody needs a bigger picture awareness of what's going on in the library so that we can all market all of our services and our programs and our collection and our staff as good as possible. I think libraries, one of our biggest problems in public libraries is marketing. Not just our services, but ourselves. What can we do for our patrons? What can we do for our coworkers? Our marketing needs to be layperson friendly. Put information where people who need it will look for it first. That may or may not be the Dewey Decimal System. We also need to avoid library jargon. My library, I'm going to call out my own library because there's the sign next to our self-check station right this very moment. Oh, it bothers me so much. I choose my battles very carefully. Somebody made that sign. It bugs me. It says something like, please take interlibrary loan materials to the circulation desk instead of the checkout. Like, you can't check out ILL stuff at the self-check because our system doesn't understand other libraries' barcodes. It doesn't work with RFID always the same way that our materials do in our self-check machine. So you do have to take them to the circulation desk. But why would they say, please take interlibrary loan? In fact, I don't even think it says interlibrary loan. I think the sign says, please take ILL items to the circulation desk. Who knows what ILL stands for? And who even knows what a circulation desk is? That's library jargon. The sign could just say, please take materials from other libraries to the checkout desk. I think that's pretty clear on what we're asking people to do. My library also has a phone menu that says something like, press 1 for renewals. Well, what's a renewal? Words like program and reference, press 1 for reference, plus 4 for program sign up. Those words mean something else to people outside of libraries. Program could be a computer program, right? The word event is a better, more layperson friendly word. Press 1 for reference. Well, what's reference? Are we giving employee references? Is that what a reference is? People don't know. So we need, for help finding information, press 1. use the action, I think, is a better idea. So this is, it's a thing I'm going to take up with my library very soon because clearly it bothers me. But I think a lot of libraries have this issue. They have signs. Oh gosh, be careful with your signs. Don't put signs everywhere. How important is the information on the sign, and what other way could you give people that information? I once visited a library where there was a sign hanging in the stacks that said, "No gum in the library." And I thought, going back to the idea of the trend of one, which I will talk about later in this presentation, is the trend of one. You know that something happened one time. They found gum in a book or on a shelf, and now they need a sign that says, "No gum in the library." Well, that's ridiculous. First of all, your sign is not going to stop somebody from putting their gum on a shelf. People who do that kind of thing are just going to do that kind of thing. It's sad, but they're just going to do it, and your sign is not going to stop them. So think about signage best practices as it relates to marketing. Signs should market services, not necessarily rules. Okay, let's move on to communication. Communication is, the way I'm looking at it here, the ability to teach, the ability to present, and media training. So specifically, the ability to make an impact when presenting data. The ability to understand communication methods for different work styles and different personality types. The media training is an important one. First of all, you need a policy at your library about who's allowed to talk to the media. That is important. Maybe only the director is allowed to talk to the media. Maybe the community relations person can talk to the media. But if the media comes calling asking questions, not just anybody is allowed to talk to them. Of course, there is a nice and discreet way to pass those inquiries on to the people who do have the ability to talk to the media, but those people need media training. We need to have an elevator pitch. We need to always be positive when we talk to the media, never negative. Even if we're addressing a negative situation, you have to find a way to spin it positive. Even if it's just, here's what we've learned from this situation. It will never happen again, and here's why. We've learned from it. That's a positive spin on a negative situation. You always have to tell the media what you want them to hear, regardless of what they ask. So make sure that your message is heard. I learned this the hard way, and I will out myself because one of the most embarrassing things that ever happened to me happened on CBC radio. So our Awful Library Books website that I think I mentioned in our introduction, awfullibrarybooks.net, take a look if you haven't before. It got suddenly popular in the summer of 2009. We were the Time Magazine website of the day. We had done some interviews with Michigan radio. For whatever reason, the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting, were the very first people from radio to ask us for an interview. We'd been interviewed. We've been in the New Yorker. We've been in the Guardian. We've been in the Huffington Post. The first time that radio, and this is really early on, this might have even been one of the very first media outlets to contact us because we had no media training at that point. Things were just sort of starting to happen. Awful Library Books was starting to get some attention. When it happens, it sort of blows up. Things that go viral literally overnight. We were not prepared for it. And so the guy from the CBC radio ended the interview with a simple question. He said, "So Holly, what have you learned from this?" And for whatever reason, I stumbled over that answer. Completely stupid. I said, "Well, I've learned, let's see, I've learned," and I desperately, Mary was on the phone with me as part of the interview as well, and I was thinking, oh God, Mary, bail me out, think of something. I couldn't think of something. I don't know what the deal was. I finally came up with something ridiculous. I don't even know what the answer was that I gave, but it was horrible. That was my opportunity when he said, "What have you learned?" It was my opportunity to tell them what I wanted to know, regardless of what the question is. Our message with Awful Library Books is that librarians have to pay attention to library collections, that if we're going to stay relevant to library users, the collection is a big part of that, and that we have to offer people materials that make sense for the information that they're seeking, and that all these crazy things that we put on our website is partially nostalgia. People like nostalgia and it's fun, but there's a hidden lesson there about collection management as well. Why I couldn't come up with that at the time, I do not know. Mary Kelly's sister is a publicist. She works with famous people and teaches them how to give interviews. So we spent some time with Mary's sister, and never again have I made that mistake. When you're caught anywhere, at a conference, at a meeting, in town, around town, wherever, and someone asks you about your library, whether it's the media or whether you're talking to your neighbor, you have to be able to communicate positively about what the library is doing. And people will find you in the grocery store and say, hey, what's going on over at the library? My tax bill just went way up. What's up with that? Everyone, pages, maintenance staff, librarians, everyone needs to be able to talk about that. They need to understand what the truth is and what the answers are. Which sort of brings me to administrative skills. So administrative skills are things that they start to teach you in library school, like budgeting and how libraries are funded. You really need an in-depth understanding of these things. I would even say that every level of staff, everyone who works in the library, needs to have a general understanding of how libraries are funded. What is the library's budget situation? We don't all necessarily have to say, what the millage rate is and how much actual money was budgeted, for operating expenses every year. But we need to know that our libraries are funded through tax, property taxes. We need to know if the library has a millage. Is it in perpetuity, or are they going to have to go for a millage again? We need to be able to talk about these things with the public. We need to be able to train our coworkers in these ideas. We need to include staff and public in our elevator pitch about libraries. We need to have an organization-wide understanding of how these things work so that we better understand the decisions that are made and so that we can make more informed decisions ourselves. I think that transparency is one of the most important skills, competencies that a library director and a board member, anyone in a position of power, management, whatever, in a library needs to have transparency. They need to talk about how the library is funded, the library's budget, so that everyone understands the bigger picture. They understand when decisions are made that they don't agree with, what went into that decision. We can all help the situation. We can all make more informed decisions if we are informed. We can spend wisely in both money and time. We can commit to and contribute to the library's mission and its goals. And we can talk to our friends and neighbors about these things when it matters, like at voting time. Here's where I want to talk about the trend of one. The ability to make data-driven decisions is one of the more important competencies in this entire list. So this is like having a feeling about something versus actual data that proves it. Library decisions are not about the staff member or their feelings. They should come from demonstrated community needs or anticipated needs based on trend analysis. So we need to collect meaningful data to make decisions for the future. So the trend of one is where we make a decision based on one instance. They found gum on a shelf, and so suddenly there was a no gum in the library policy. I have an even more ridiculous example than that. I once worked in a library where a regular patron literally led a pony through the front doors of the library. There was a horse in the library, and somebody at the circulation desk said, "Whoa, what's happening here? You can't bring a horse in the library. What's going on?" And this patron said, "Oh, well, I have this new pony, and I thought the children might like to see this new pony." And the staff member said, "Well, yeah, I bet they would, but you know what? we'll make an announcement. Hey kids, there's a pony out in the parking lot if you'd like to go see it. Just handle it a little bit differently. Instead, this staff member said, well, we need to have a no horses in the library policy. Well, no, we don't, because that's never happening again. That's a one-off. That was a weird decision made by one person. The situation was corrected. The kids looked at the pony outside. Everything was fine. We do not need a no horses in the library policy. That's making a decision based on one situation, the trend of one. Another competency is the ability to make decisions at all. I once worked for a director who just had trouble making decisions. I remember once we were getting new library letterhead, and so she had 4 different colors of off-white paper. There was buff, and there was cream, there was ivory, and there was, off-white. And she said, I just can't choose. I don't know which one we should have. She came to me and said, Holly, you're good at making decisions. Which one do you want? Pretty sure I didn't even look at the paper. I just put my finger on one of them and said, this looks good. Who cares? Buff or cream? Like, literally, who cares? If you hate your letterhead, get a different one next time. It's just not that big of a deal, right? So you can't get bogged down by simple decisions. All I could think was, man, if she can't pick buff or cream, what is this woman like when real decisions have to be made, right? You have to make decisions based on the bigger picture of the library's needs, and then prioritize what decisions you spend a lot of time and energy on. Buff versus cream is not worth any time or energy whatsoever. Just pick one, right? Delegate the easy decisions, and then focus on more than just the situation at hand when making big decisions. Data-driven decisions. The objective versus subjective is so important. Consider the situation and how important it is at the moment. Assessment is evaluation. So librarians need to be able to assess data. They need to be able to assess the skills needed to do specific projects. They need to assess the skill levels of our coworkers to create the most efficient teams. We need to have a personal awareness of our own strengths and weaknesses. That's really important, being able to assess yourself and build teams that put strengths where your weaknesses are. We need to be able to assess the return on investment on everything. I think public libraries in general, do a poor job of thinking about return on investment. We also need to consider the priorities of the organization versus our personal priorities. Holistic thinking goes along with assessment. There's a balance between what the library needs versus a specific candidate. If you're hiring staff, a specific candidate's strengths and their preferences. So in the future, libraries will want to hire people who are very adaptable to whatever the library needs. They will have a bigger picture idea of what the library is about and what the library needs. Here's an example. Mary was hired as a part-time librarian. She's since moved out of that position, but she was hired in that particular position because she had an MBA, because she had computer teaching experience, because she had web design experience, because she had a personal interest in genealogy. She also doesn't run screaming during tax season. None of those things were part of her job description at the time. She was not in charge of the tax forms. She was not in charge of the website or the genealogy collection. At that time, she was not teaching computer classes. None of those skills that she brought to us were part of her job description. But all of those things are important to our institution as a whole and will be important as part of succession planning. As it turns out, someone retired and Mary moved into a position that does all of those things. She teaches computer classes. She is the webmaster. She is in charge of the genealogy collection. So she was hired back then thinking ahead to succession planning and thinking about skills that are important to our library as a whole. She was actually hired at that time to take over for a librarian who started a paper crafting program. That librarian was very crafty. Oh, she could make the most beautiful paper crafts. And so she started this paper crafting workshop, like a monthly group that met and did paper crafts. It was so popular. There were 40 people coming to this thing every month. And when that librarian moved on to another job, she got a management position at another library. Mary moved into that position. Mary, doesn't do crafts. She doesn't do paper crafts or really any other kind of craft. But we were not hiring a person passionate about paper crafts. It was nice that the previous librarian had that skill and that passion and started this club based on that. That's great when that happens. Mary was going to have to take over that program. She did not need to be passionate about paper crafts to make that happen. She needed to be passionate about library programs that work, library programs that are popular. We find a way to continue a program that was working. She ended up, finding the funding and hiring it out. It was a perfect solution. The paper crafting group still exists. Even after Mary's moved out of that position, the paper crafting group still exists. It's still a thing. It's still popular. We didn't need a person passionate about paper crafts. We needed a person passionate about library programs who understood the bigger picture of library programming, the return on investment, the idea that this was a thing that was working. We can't just not offer it anymore because we didn't have a paper crafting librarian anymore. We needed someone who could think bigger, find a way to continue this program that was working so well. Leadership skills also seems like sort of a no-brainer. You need people with a willingness to make decisions and step up. You need people who can take initiative, who notice when things need attention, who understand when something needs an executive decision made. I've already talked about transparency. That's part of leadership. We are in the information sharing business, so transparency is key for librarians. We're not hoarding information. We're not keeping secrets from staff or from patrons. It's their library, their tax dollars fund it. Transparency is one of my most important values that I hold. Time management is part of leadership skills, the ability to run a meeting, the ability to communicate effectively and with the correct tool. A meeting is not always the most efficient tool, right? Where time management is concerned, maybe an email is all you need to do. Project management is part of leadership skills. Collaboration is part of leadership skills. Another good one is conflict resolution. Conflict resolution makes professional conversations more meaningful. It makes disagreements valuable instead of contentious. I disagree doesn't mean I hate you. Once you can wrap your head around that, when you can disagree professionally and be disagreed with professionally, that's the mark of a good leader. Having diplomacy skills, being able to say, you know what? You've changed my mind. I hear what you're saying. I hadn't thought of it that way, and now I agree with you. Or being willing to go to the mat with data, not just I feel this way, but I have data to back up why this is so important to me, and have professional disagreements and conversations, and talk people into things based on data, not I'm right and I know I'm right because it just seems right. That's ridiculous. Equity, diversity, and inclusion are skills that every librarian needs to have. They should be part of every professional activity. They should be reflected in the librarian workforce. This is something libraries need to work on. We need our staff to represent our communities, but we also need to provide cultural experiences for our communities to learn about people and beliefs and lifestyles of others, not just through staff, but collections and programs. Equity, diversity, and inclusion raise the esteem of library professionals. We give voice and refuge to marginalized groups in public libraries. I love this Libraries Are for Everyone campaign. Google it. Google Libraries Are for Everyone. There's a whole series of these images that can be used in libraries, and they're just fantastic. I love these images so much. Libraries are for everyone. Like I said, they give voice and refuge to marginalized groups. Global awareness is a competency for librarians because information sharing is global. So everything that we do, whether it's for staff or for public, needs to take equity, diversity, and inclusion into consideration. The only thing consistent in librarianship is change. There's no place for we've always done it that way in libraries. So flexibility and adaptability are important. These are important skills. Librarians must be able to embrace change because in order to stay relevant, librarians and librarianship and libraries have changed and they will continue to change. So embrace that change. The last of the competencies is customer service. Customer service is an attitude, not a department. I love that phrase. My library has a commitment to public service that goes beyond all other things. My library has identified 4 values, and one of those values is personalized service. Above everything else for us is customer service. We need our librarians to have patience and empathy, to take initiative to help people find answers. They need to have sort of a stick-to-itiveness, if that's even a word. You know, keep trying until we get what the patron's looking for. We can't just give up because we didn't find the answer. Referral is an answer, and that's okay, but we have to connect people with resources. We have to have a commitment to public service. Everything that we do comes back to public service. Everything we do in our off-desk time is for the patrons. Every piece of our collection, every program we offer, every service that we offer is for the public. So customer service is an attitude, and it's an important one. So let's talk about some ways to keep up. It is a race to keep up and even stay ahead in all of those areas. So how do we do that? One of the ways we can do that is through formal education. You all are still working on your MLIS, but I got my degree in 1999. I'm almost 20 years out. So I could go back to school. I could audit an MLIS class. I chose to teach this class as an adjunct faculty member partially for this very reason. I'm learning all the material as I'm presenting it. I am sort of relearning it and relearning it based on the 20 years of experience that I now have. It's a whole different thing to experience this class as an instructor with 20 years of experience than it was, in library school. So audit some MLIS classes or classes in programs outside of library science, in teaching and technology, in business. Never stop learning. Formal education. I know not everyone can afford to do that, so I do have some other options coming up here. I also have advice for library science programs. I think it would be great to create some online classes or a webinar series that are affiliated with the university for working librarians, accredited with continuing education credits given, or official certificates that are submitted to the attendee's workplace, taught by adjunct professors that are working librarians. We can learn so much from each other. So that's formal education. There's also self-directed and continuing education. I mentioned lynda.com, YouTube, and there's all kinds of ways to do self-directed continuing ed. Gale courses, Gale the publisher, Coursera, Codecademy, Microsoft.com has Microsoft Office tutorials. There's openculture.com. As long as we set reasonable goals, I feel like everyone says that they must be better at technology, but no one knows how. So limit yourself to something like perfecting a spreadsheet or learning more about the library's ILS, Integrated Library System, whatever system it is that your library uses. Commit to regular, small bits of time. 15 minutes a day is more productive than hours and hours at once. You have to understand yourself as a learner. How much practice do you need? Do you learn better through visual, auditory, or hands-on? Do you like practical projects or theoretical projects? Do you like listening to a lecture or doing an actual project? Knowing yourself is a huge part of this. So be realistic and stick to reasonable goals. And I think that, a 15-minute TED Talk is a way to sort of keep up with all kinds of things. I think it's a great idea. My library holds a staff in-service once a year. Every single staff member, it's mandatory to attend, including our board members. Our board members also attend. There's always an emergency or safety training piece, like a fire drill or a tornado drill. There's usually a human resources element, like learning how our compensation system works or how you can move up. There's usually a bigger picture library industry piece, so trends in libraries. We've had the American Library Association talk. We've done strategic planning, so sort of a holistic, bigger picture piece. We also usually do a team building exercise. We've done scavenger hunts and had trivia, just different things like that. So it's an opportunity for people in different departments to work together who don't see each other much the rest of the year, who don't get to work together. It's an opportunity for the director and the library board to share their vision and their goals with everyone in the same space, in the same context. And it's an opportunity for departments to train on specific skills. My library also has a technology petting zoo. It's basically just a drawer filled with e-readers and tablets. Staff members can check them out to themselves. They're not for the public. They're just for staff. We just have some Kindles. We have a Kindle Fire and a Kindle Paperwhite, and we have a Nook and an iPad and just different things available in this drawer that staff can play with. They can take them home. They can learn how to use them. Vendors can set these up for you too. Best Buy is a company that in the past, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to do public programs for the public that were called a petting zoo, and they would bring all different kinds of devices that people could play with and learn about. So you could do that for staff as well. I worked with a librarian who had this fantastic idea for a librarian exchange program. This is where you meet with people at other libraries who have duties similar to yours, and you compare notes. So the head of circulation at one library meets with the head of circulation at another library. How do you handle interlibrary loan? How do you handle renewals? How does your ILS work? I have met with the head of adult services at a local library. We've talked about how our hiring process works and what our new employee welcome packet consists of. We talked about how we do desk scheduling. Oh, you can learn so much from other people who are doing similar jobs in other libraries. You can also learn from completely different departments. It would be really helpful for a clerk to shadow a librarian. They learn how what they do, fits in with what the librarians do. The librarians learn how what they do every day fits in with what the clerks do, the circulation staff. You get that holistic library, bigger picture idea. You could do a job rotation within a branch system. Going to another library and seeing how they do things, distance from your own job gives you insight. It gives you new perspective. It's really inspiring. I like that idea. And it's free. You don't have to spend any money on a librarian exchange program. Staff time, I guess, would be the only thing. Mentoring is so important. So get a mentor and learn by their example, or be a mentor. Help the next generation keep up as well. They can benefit from your experience. My library has 3 paid interns, and it's one of my favorite parts of my job is working with the interns. I love mentoring interns. That's a simple one. Librarian Nerd Club. This is something that Mary and I have dubbed. We just have a group of friends from library school. Mary graduated in 2002. Like I said, I graduated in 99. So we have kept in touch with some people we met in library school. 20 years later, we get together, we have some drinks at a bar, we have dinner, we talk about our jobs. We're all at roughly the same point in our careers, so there's an even playing field. We're talking about how do you move up, and do you have any interest in becoming a library director? We're all sort of middle managers or moving into middle management. I'm 44 years old. I have no problem sharing that information. I'm a middle manager. I think I'm the typical age of a librarian who's worked for 20 years, maybe a little on the young side, if anything. But it's great to get together with these people and we talk about how do we handle interns. And now we are the mentors. We still have our mentors as well, and they come to dinner too. Um, and sometimes we invite our mentees and they learn. It's just fantastic. It's a way to compare notes and stay energized. It's informal. We call it the Librarian Nerd Club. Lastly, the way to keep up is by paying attention. Read the library blogs, Twitter feeds, read the professional literature. There's a hashtag on Twitter that I love called Library Life. There is blogs like Storytime Underground. ALA and PLA have blogs and professional literature that you can keep up with. There's the Gale blog, there's Library Journal, there's Public Libraries Journal. Lots of ways to keep up just by paying attention to the industry, what's going on around us. I also think you should think outside the library box. Read blogs like Ask a Manager, which is one of my favorites. There's Evil HR Lady, which is a fun one. The Harvard Business Review, Forbes, Lifehacker is a good one. So pay attention and think about how the world around you relates to libraries. Expectations are important. Being aware that there are professional association publications on competencies and standards that are out there. YALSA has a standards document that I shared previously in the Teen and Youth module. LLAMA, LLAMA, is the Library Leadership and Management Association. They have competencies on the ALA website. ALA.org/A to Z /library-competencies. That was a mouthful, but that URL also talks about library competencies. That was ALA.org/tools/A to Z /library-competencies. The other thing about expectations has to do with job descriptions, and I think public libraries have awful job descriptions. I understand that when you post a job, it has to be somewhat generic. It's more a marketing tool for getting people interested in applying for the job. So I think that there should be those job descriptions, but also a job guidelines document of some sort that's given to you when you're hired as part of your training process. That's way more descriptive. That would be the job description you're actually evaluated on. When your annual review time comes around, I feel like, either I like you or I don't clearly doesn't figure in. Do you do your job or do you not do your job is part of it, but I want to add to what degree. What does your job description say you're supposed to do, and to what degree? Are you meeting the benchmarks that were set for you? My own job description says things like collection development, staff hiring and training. It doesn't say to what degree. So collection development, am I supposed to buy things, weed things, repair things? Collection development is a whole, as you saw in that module, there's a lot that goes on into that. I would like to see a job description or a job guideline with benchmarks like, your collection we're asking you to develop is the history collection. It has an average turnover of whatever. It has an average age of whatever. It has all of those data points and metrics that we talked about in the collection development module. Put those in the job description so that we know what the goal of the job is. What am I supposed to do and to what degree? We also need to be realistic with our expectations, but we need to, as managers, tell people what's expected of them. We can't expect people to know how to spend their time and what the goal of the job is, or what budget goals are, how to be realistic with their budget, if we don't tell them. I think that we need to be better with our expectations. All right, this is one of my pet peeves, but I don't have time. So time management is one of my strengths. I'm pretty good at time management. It's one of the things that I see in my staff, but also just in people, in American population. Time management is not generally one of people's strengths. So as a manager, I have to schedule people, and not just their desk time and their off desk time and when they're in the building and when they're off, but people who are not good at time management may need to have their time scheduled a little more specifically. That's difficult to do without micromanaging. Now, micromanaging, I have no patience for. My staff all have the same degree I have. Some of them have more experience than I have in terms of years. They don't need me breathing down their neck. They know what they're doing. They're good at their jobs. The expectations and the job descriptions are clear to them. I can stay out of their way. My job is to provide resources like time and money and help. If they need help for their project, I can assign them an intern, or I can give them more off-desk time to complete something. So someone who tells me they don't have time to do their job, it's a little off-putting to me, because I would rather they just come to me and say, can I have time for this specific thing? I'm having trouble finishing XYZ. Because I'm good at time management, I can help them. I can find them time. I can find them help. I can delegate things for them. So not doing your job because you don't have time is really not an option. I know that sounds a lot meaner. I'm being kind of mean to make a point here. I'm really not this mean with my staff, my coworkers. You have to schedule time for things like employee development. If you expect your staff to keep up, then you have to schedule time for that to be possible. Again, the 15 minutes a day, I don't think it's too much to ask to give people 15 minutes a day to watch a TED Talk or do a course or watch some lynda.com videos. It's expected as part of the expectations of the job, clear to everyone who works in my department, that they're expected to keep up. I provide them with the tools to make that possible. Time is a tool. So for employees, it might be up to you, because you might not work in a place that has the luxury of time like I do. I have sub-librarians and interns. I really have resources available to me to give people time. Never want to take that for granted, because I have also worked in places where I was on desk 40 hours a week. We didn't have a back office. The reference desk was my workspace 40 hours a week. I tell you what, by the 40th hour of the week, when that phone rings, you do your best, but you're sort of over it. So I understand now that I work in a place what a luxury time is. And I don't want to sound like I'm taking advantage of that, or that just everybody has time. I understand not everybody has the luxury of time. So you may have to use your own time. You may have to use your own money if it's a priority for you to keep up with professional development. I don't say that lightly, because I think that most libraries can make time. I don't think 15 minutes a day is impossible for any library to make professional development a priority. Like I said, I'm just really good at time management. So if anyone wants tips, I will be happy to share that magic of time management. So the library profession has a high degree of job satisfaction. There have been studies that show that librarians have a high level of job satisfaction. This is going beyond your day job. We're satisfied with our day jobs too, but professionalism is important in the library profession. We are professionals. We are master's degreed professionals. If we want the rest of the world to understand that and, to give us that level of credit and, status and respect, then we need to act like professionals. We need to contribute to our library literature through publishing and presenting. We need to sit on committees, and we need to contribute to our professional associations. So much more job satisfaction comes to you when you participate in the profession. It makes you better at your day job. And again, I understand that time, the luxury of time, is a big part of that. People don't have time to publish, present, be on a committee, participate in the professional associations. But I promise you that there is so much more job satisfaction when you get to a point where you can contribute to the profession. When you're doing something for your day job, whether it's a program or collection development, teaching a class, whatever that might be, think about how you could use that information and that skill and that experience to further the profession as a whole. So I want to quantify some of the ideas that I presented today. This is the very last slide. I know this was one of the longer lectures this semester. It's important, though, that I quantify some of the ideas that I presented today. So Bloom's taxonomy is a hierarchical model of learning where remembering is the least complex in this sample and creating at the top of the pyramid is the most complex. So librarian competencies should be considered under this model as well. So the skills we outlined today, there are lower level ones, technology and research. You need to remember and understand and apply those skills. I mentioned some mid-level skills like communication, decision-making, leadership skills like budgeting and funding. Those have to do with applying and analyzing. And then the high-level skills are critical thinking, assessment, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are the higher level higher level skills that I presented today. The ways to keep up that I outlined today also apply to this model. The lower level methods, like just simply paying attention, reading the professional literature, maybe the technology petting zoo, those are lower level methods. The mid-level would be self-directed continuing ed, formal education, a staff in-service, and then the higher level methods would be mentoring and probably the librarian exchange program is a higher level as well because you're evaluating and creating new ideas and new ways of doing your job based on those methods. So, in closing, each organization needs to decide what the priorities of their institution are internally. I've provided some ideas about where librarianship as an industry is headed, what I think the competencies are to remain relevant in this field, and some ways, some different ways to think about competencies and how to go about achieving them. That's it, everybody. This was the last module of the semester. It's been such a pleasure working with and talking to you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. Have a great next semester. Have a good career. Keep in touch.